The title I've given to my second lecture is Environmental Ethics and Human Health. You may be wondering whether I'm a doctor or a scientist, etc., whether I have the competence to talk about this topic. I am a lay person like you, because all of us are aware of what is happening to our societies, our environment, and human health. Laypersons like you and me also have the responsibility to talk about these issues which are affecting each and everyone. That's the reason why deliberately I chose this topic called environmental ethics and human health. Especially after the COVID-19 pandemic, all of us are very aware of the uncertainty of our lives. And unless each and every one of us is geared to take care of our environmental wholesomeness, I think the future is very, very bleak for all of us. That's the reason why this topic. Certain concepts pertaining to environment and ethics we need to brush up. Although I have referred to so many issues in my earlier talk, some things need to be repeated. And finally, we discuss the impact of environment on human health. Ethics and environment are related in several ways. For example, environmental ethics is a branch of studies that it focuses on ethical foundations of environmental values and the actions, policies, and attitudes that society uses. So environmental ethics is essential for protecting the environment, species, and resources. It promotes sustainable practices and encourages people to become more aware of the impact of their actions on the environment. It emphasizes the interconnectedness of all living things and the need to respect them. Interconnectedness of all living things, and we should respect all living things. Environmental ethics is imperative to the survival of humanity, because without these important discussions and proper use of renewable and non-renewable resources, I want you to take care of these phrases, because renewable and non-renewable resources are important. The world inherited by future generations will not be inhabitable. We are going to leave this world which is not inhabitable for our children and grandchildren. That is the kind of world we are leaving behind. So therefore, both renewable and non-renewable resources we have to take care of. Without environmental ethics, the planet might not be inhabitable for human life. That is for certain. Scientists are already warning us. We need to take their words very, very seriously. What best defines environmental ethics? The best definition of environmental ethics is the moral relationship between human beings and the environment, including non-human life form. Hitherto, we neglected the non-human life form, but now the knowledgeable people are warning us, don't ignore the existence of the non-human life, which is as organic and as interconnected as the human beings. So ethical considerations involve making decisions that are morally right and fair. Earlier also in my lecture, I referred to the moral goodness, what is right, what is wrong. All these things we need to take into account with a fresh estimation. In business, for instance, this includes fair trade, treating employees well, and honest marketing. Business does not mean making only profit. All our actions are to be watched carefully. If we are business people, we have to be extremely kind to our employees, and honest marketing is very, very necessary to keep the society on an even keel. So, environmental considerations involve businesses taking responsibility for their impact on the environment. So, what is environment? After all, it is the sum total of all living and non-living elements and their effects that influence human life. So we cannot ignore one at the cost of the other. We have to take all the living and non-living elements that forms the environment. While all living and biotic elements are animals, plants, forests, fisheries, and birds, non-living or abiotic elements, which include water, land, sunlight, rocks, air, etc. How do we describe ethics, for example? It may refer to the philosophical study of concepts of moral right and wrong, and moral good and bad, or code of moral rules, principles, or values. So these are the elements that give us the definition of ethics. For instance, there are two types of environmental ethics. They are anthropocentrism, and second one, ecocentrism. Anthropocentrism, second one is ecocentrism. Anthropocentrism is the ethic that describes the human relationship with the natural environment. Ecocentrism means it is an ethic that insists on taking care of Earth's ecosystems and ecology as they have intrinsic value. So the basic components of environments are atmosphere, or like air, lithosphere, or the rocks and soil. The basic components of environment are atmosphere or air, lithosphere or the rocks and soil, hydrosphere or the water and the living component of the environment, or the biosphere. Environmental ethics exerts influence on environmental law, environmental sociology, and environmental geology. Geography. Environmental ethics exerts influence on environmental law, environmental sociology, and environmental geography. There are three environmental factors. What are they? They are water quality, air quality, and weather. These often vary among populations and geographical locations. While many conditions of the environment are naturally occurring, the quality and impact of the environment are often affected by historical, economic, and socio-political factors. All these factors we need to take into account. Some conditions may be very, very naturally occurring, but from time to time, the economic factors, historical factors, and socio-political factors also come into play. So generally, environment means plants, animals, microorganisms, sunlight, air, rain, temperature, humidity, and other climatic factors. It is basically the surroundings where we live. That is the environment, after all. So the environment regulates the life of all living beings on Earth. With this preliminary awareness of environment and ethics, we can focus on the human health, which is so crucial for our survival and continuation. Environment, ethics, and human health is the relationship between human health and the environment is complex, dynamic, and multifaceted. It's not so easy to understand, human health and the environment because it is complex, dynamic, and multifaceted. Although the environment supports human health, conditions and substances in the environment can also increase the risk of disease, disability, and death. Okay, the disease, disability, and death, the increase because of conditions and substances that are there floating in the environment. So activities involving energy production and economic development can also have adverse impact on the environment. Ethical questions about the relationship between human health and the environment are bound to intensify with the emergence of new and evolving technologies. Technologies that can impact the environment are genetically modified organisms and biofuels and the increasing impact of climate change. Many of the most challenging ethical questions of our time address interactions between human health and the environment. How can we balance protection for the environment with other important human values such as promoting human health and well-being? What steps should we take to mitigate or adapt to climate change? Climate change is a big thing, and you are all familiar with this particular topic, which is discussed threadbare by experts all around. Because of climate change, our weather pattern changes so drastically. So what steps should we take to mitigate or adapt to climate change is one of the important questions. How should we regulate substances that can have adverse public health and environmental impacts, such as pesticides, industrial chemicals, and pollutants? How should we ensure the safety of our food supply? Should we use genetically modified organisms to enhance agricultural productivity or control diseases transmitted to humans by animals? How should we balance occupational safety protections with economics and the right to work? How should we balance safety and affordability in setting housing standards? How should we regulate energy production and use to protect the environment and human health? How should we make decisions concerning the placement of waste sites, factories, highways, and other structures that impose increased health risks on local residents? How should we address the interests of communities that were historically underserved and excluded from environmental decisions that affected their health? This is a major departure from the traditional understanding of environmental risks. For example, the community, so many communities were marginalized, neglected, and they were not involved in the decision-making process. Now the trend has changed. It is the need of the hour to be inclusive, to take their opinion, because we have neglected them for so long. At least now we have an opportunity to make amends. That is the expert's opinion. So finding satisfactory solutions to environmental health problems will become increasingly important as the environmental impact of human activities continue to mount. So because of human activity, the increasing of human activity, the environment change is occurring. That means the environment provides energy, materials, and habitat that are essential for sustaining human life and health. The environment includes what? Physical environment, consisting of air, water, soil, weather, and climate. Biological environment, consisting of food, plants, animals, fungi, microorganisms, and ecosystems. Social environment, consisting of familial and personal relationships and communities. Lastly, built environment, which consists of highways, houses, cities, factories, and other structures. For most of human history, increases in longevity were mostly due to improved access to and improvements in water quality, hygiene, and food. Water quality, hygiene, and food has enabled to achieve longevity rather than innovations in biomedical technology. People may tend to believe that it is the credit should go to the biomedical technology because they have enabled, that technology has enabled to combat very many diseases. There is a grain of truth in what they say, but I think the water quality and hygiene and food has contributed a lot for achieving longevity in the human world. So lack of basic necessities is still a significant cause of human mortality. Every year in the world, about 6 million people die from hunger or malnutrition. This is what I call lack of basic necessity. And about 4 lakh people die from foodborne diseases. About 8 lakh people, mostly children, die from gastrointestinal diseases caused by unsafe drinking water or poor sanitation or hygiene. Tens of thousands of people die due to risks associated with homelessness. Although environment sustains human life, man-made conditions increase the risk of disease, disability, and deaths. For example, chronic exposure. Chronic exposure means long-term exposure to air pollution increases the risk of lung cancer, heart disease, and aggravates asthma. Acute exposure means short-term exposure can cause headache, dizziness, weakness, vomiting, chest pain, and death. The World Health Organization, WHO, estimates that about 3.8 million people die every year from indoor smoke, from cooking fuels, and an additional 4.2 million die from outdoor air pollution. So dangerous working conditions can increase the risk of occupational illnesses and injuries, such as skin cancer, dermatitis, rashes, ulcers, arthritis, pain, hearing loss, vision damage, and back, neck, knee, and hand injuries. Poor housing conditions can increase the risk of death or injury as a result of accidents, fires, floods, or earthquakes. Adverse weather can cause death or illness from heat, smoke inhalation, and drowning. Oppressive social conditions such as racial, ethnic, and gender prejudice and discrimination can reduce access to healthcare. Environmental degradation can increase crime, terrorism, and warfare, which lead to trauma and other psychological problems. So automobile traffic accidents kill about 1.3 million people every year. Therefore, there is an increasing clamor for environmental justice. When so many people are losing their lives unnecessarily, there is a clamor for environmental justice. Virtually, every environmental health issue has implication for social and economic justice. Although environmental justice movement, which roughly started in 1982, focused initially on inequalities related to race, ethnicity, and income, environmental scientists and environmental justice advocates have come to see the importance of dealing with inequalities related to age, infirmity, poor access to healthcare, and other vulnerabilities. Now, today, environmental justice is widely recognized as a key concern in environmental laws, regulations, and international agreements. One of the most important problems related to environmental justice is ensuring that decision-making processes that affect public health and environment are fair and effective, democratic, deliberative, open, and inclusive. There is nothing secret about it. The point is, you must include everybody, you must discuss, debate, and deliberate. It should be open discussion and all inclusive. No segment of the society should be left behind without allowing them to participate in the discussion about environmental and human health issues. So fairness is difficult to achieve because industry and political groups often use their power and money to influence elected representatives, government officials, and sway public opinion to achieve outcomes that align with their interests. The rich people, the politically power people, the industrial monarchs, barons will always find ways to suppress the others. At the cost of the society, they will prosper somehow. So, to counterbalance these dominant groups, it is important to ensure that the underrepresented and marginalized groups. Now, I want you to pay attention to this particular point, namely, there is a radical shift, paradigm shift in the attention that we draw towards the underrepresented and the marginalized groups because they did not have any say in the matter. Now we are including them, and increasingly they are going to play a decisive role in the formulation of policies and regulations. They have the opportunity to express their needs and concerns, and that their voices are heard and given due consideration. Now, this has been demonstrated for many diseases with environmental linkages like asthma. Some of the preventative measures could include public and environmental health interventions and programs such as improved sanitation, water treatment, waste management, health education, disaster preparedness, and mosquito control, enforcement of occupational and health, public health regulations, and oversight of food and drug safety. Regulations take care of air quality standards, incorporate protections for people with respiratory diseases, such as asthma, and pesticide regulations provide additional protection for children. Now, allocation of healthcare funding also raises environmental justice issues. In the US, in America, public and private payers spend hundreds of billions of dollars each year on healthcare, most of which goes toward medical diagnosis and treatment. One might argue, however, that a higher proportion of that money should be spent on preventive measures, which tend to be more cost effective than treatment. That is the argument nowadays. So we need to take into account the question of human rights as well. All these years, somehow we thought human rights question is not that important. But now increasingly, people are talking about the human rights issue in the domain of public health and environment. So therefore, various public and environmental health strategies and policies pit the rights of individuals against the good of society. Now, the question is, should we always care to protect the society at the cost of the human individual rights? Now, that debate is going on. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, societies implemented many different measures to control the spread of the disease. For example, isolation, quarantine, mandatory mask wearing, testing, vaccination, physical distancing, travel restrictions, business and school closures, curfews, stay-at-home orders, and disease surveillance. All these things we imposed on people. The main argument in favor of these public health strategies and policies that individual human rights can be restricted for compelling societal goals. When you have such a huge disease spreading all across the world, well, you can't break your head over individual human rights. That was the argument put forward. Preventing transmission of a highly infectious, deadly disease is our first priority. Therefore, you have to adjust and don't make a hue and cry of individual human rights, they said. However, restrictions on rights should be guided by scientific evidence and sound ethical arguments. In the absence of sound scientific evidence and sound ethical argument, you cannot impose on and take away the individual human rights, is the opinion of the experts. Some environmental health protections may also restrict human rights. So many of these have to do with economic and property rights as well. For example, water pollution regulations restrict the rights of property owners to dispose of waste products on their land that may contaminate fresh water supplies. It may be your land, it may be your private property, but you can't throw dirt, you can't throw pollutants as you like on your land, because ultimately, after the rain, those debris, those pollutants may contaminate fresh water. Therefore, you cannot have 100% private human right, so to say. See, for example, the owner of a coal burning power plant must deal with many laws concerning air pollution generated by the plant, disposal of solid waste, and workplace safety. All these he has to take into account, the power plant owner. For example, you say, I am developing, I have a plan to build 150 new homes. He may have to deal with laws concerning storm drainage, water and sewage lines, gas lines, lot sizes, sidewalks, and many other things you have to fulfill if you want to build an apartment consisting of 150 houses. So pesticides, restrictions on economic and property rights should be guided by sound ethical arguments and scientific evidence. Now, future developments in medical science combined with improvements in science, technology, and industry, such as advances in nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, energy production, and geoengineering, are likely to raise novel ethical issues concerning the relationship between human health and environment. All these things we were unaware of. For example, this artificial intelligence thing, we do not know what effect it is going to have on human health. Similarly, the case with nanotechnology, which is a new thing altogether, and genetic engineering is another area which is likely to spread its shadow on the human health and environment. So to deal with new and long-standing issues fairly and effectively, this is the litmus test. We have to deal with these new problems fairly and effectively. It is important for scientists, scholars, policymakers, and lay people. All of us are lay persons, including me. I am not a scientist, I am not a doctor, I am not an environmentalist. As lay people, we have a say in the matter. We cannot be mute bystanders and allow these experts to behave as they like, because our life is involved and the lives of the future generation is absolutely involved. Therefore, we have to participate, we have to discuss, and we cannot allow only the policymakers to have the final say in the matter. So, therefore, the discussion ought to be free, open, and inclusive. The discussion, there is nothing secret about it. There is nothing confidential about it. Openly, we have to discuss, threadbare, because our welfare, well-being, and our future is involved about ethic and environmental health. We have to participate very, very actively. Lastly, we need to spare a thought on another important issue called climate change. Now, Climate change is the significant variation of average weather conditions becoming warmer, wetter, and drier. Increasingly, the weather becomes warmer, wetter, and drier over several decades or longer. That is climate change. And it can be differentiated from natural weather variability. We can observe the climate change through warming temperatures, increases in the frequency or intensity of some extreme weather events, and rising sea levels. So these impacts threaten our health and affecting the food we eat, the water we drink, the air we breathe, and the weather we experience. Climate change produces all these variables. For example, in Mysore, today is very, very hot. Yesterday it was cold. Day before yesterday, the weather was very cloudy. Every day, weather pattern changes. And during the day, so many changes take place. I think it is all attributable to what we call the larger thing called climate change. So climate change is the single biggest health threat facing humanity today. Climate impacts are already harming health through air pollution, disease, extreme weather events, forced displacement, pressures on mental health, and increased hunger and poor nutrition in places where people cannot grow or find sufficient food. Global warming is the biggest factor in climate change. The reasons for global warming are quite a few. Burning coal, oil and gas produce carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide. Cutting down forests, which is called deforestation, increasing livestock farming, fertilizers containing nitrogen produce nitrous oxide emissions. Now, on Earth, there are many different types of climates. For instance, dry climate is the result of little vegetation. Tropical climate presupposes wet and hot climate with monsoon seasons. Polar climate indicates cold and dry climate year long. And there can be plenty of wildlife and vegetation. And mild climate represents warm summers and mild winters. We need to take some actions for a healthy planet. It is not the concern of one village or one town or one city. We have to take into account the well-being of the entire planet. For example, one of the poets said long back, the British poet, where can we find a planet like this? This was the question he posed in one of his poems. Where can we find a better planet than this? So, Iruvudonde Bhumi, that was the slogan. That is also, I think, a line in a poem in Kannada. Iruvudonde Bhumi. We all inherit the one planet, that is Earth, green planet. And where do we go if we completely destroy or contribute for its destruction? There is no better place than the Earth planet. We need to take some actions for a healthy planet. Save energy at home. Much of our electricity and heat are powered by coal, oil, and gas. Climate change is bad because the humans and wild animals face new challenges for survival. More frequent and intense drought, storms, heat waves, rising sea levels, melting glaciers and warming oceans can directly harm animals, destroy the places they live, and wreak havoc on people's livelihoods and communities. So we can also contribute our might in protecting the earth. As have been said, we can adopt the policy of reduce, reuse, and recycle. 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. We can volunteer for cleanups in our community. We can educate ourselves and our neighbors. We can conserve water. We can always choose sustainable things. We can shop wisely. We can use long-lasting light bulbs. We can always plant a tree. While climate change cannot be stopped, it can always be slowed down by adopting some of the routines mentioned above. So this is an irreversible process. They say reversible, and all that. No, this climate change is an irreversible process. It may go from bad to worse. In order to prevent that eventuality, we can slow down the climate change by adopting some of the things that I just now recalled. We can conserve water, for instance. We can always choose
ತಿಂತ ಇತ್ತಂದ್ರೆ ಅದೇನ್ ಬೇಜಾರಾಗಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ. ಅದು ಹುಲಿ ಮಾಂಸನ ರಕ್ತನ ಕುಡಿದ್ಬಿಡ್ತು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಜಿಂಕೆ ತಿನ್ನಲ್ಲ ಅಂತದ್ದು. ಅಲ್ಲ, ಅದು ರುಚಿ ಹತ್ತು ಬಿಡ್ತಂದ್ರೆ ಹಂಗೆ ಅಂತ. ಈಗ ಇವ್ರಿಗೆ ಏನಾಗೈತೆ ರುಚಿ.
That's the reason why I said, while climate change cannot be stopped, it can always be slowed down by adopting some of the routines mentioned just now. To avoid the worst consequences of climate change, we will need to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050 or sooner. Net zero means that, on balance, no more carbon is dumped into the atmosphere than it is taken out. That is the resolution made, and this is the target we are expected to reach by 2050. Climate change was started with the Industrial Revolution in the 17th and 18th centuries, precisely 1800 AD. 1800 AD is the cutoff date, the watershed year, so to say. From then onwards, Industrial Revolution and its impact started to engulf the whole world. The increased human activities have released large amounts of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, as you all know. So we, as responsible human beings, must act with care and caution so that this planet Earth is allowed to protect us for a few more millennia. The age of the Earth is calculated as 4.5 billion years. That means the Earth has survived for so long, but we seem to be determined to shorten its age by our relentless activities, both the first world and the third world. Some people may not like me using the expression third world to describe ourselves, the southern hemisphere. Most of us are third world countries. Why should we fight shy of such a description? We can call ourselves the third world country. First world country is the nations of rich countries. Therefore, both of us, first world countries and the third world countries, must urgently adopt corrective measures to ensure a healthy future for the coming generation, so to say. For example, yesterday I was reading an article in the Deccan Herald called The Green Goblin. Global talks aren't helping climate action. Act local. That's the title of the article, written by Ms. Harini Nagendra, an environmentalist and a professor at the Azim Premji University, Bangalore. She has said, in the last week of November, in the aftermath of the divisive and many would argue failed UN Climate Change Conference in Baku, COP29, it is called, representatives from countries across the world met in Busan, that is Indonesia, to discuss another planetary scale crisis, that is plastic pollution. This is the planetary scale crisis. this has engulfed the entire planet, this plastic pollution. In 2023, 413.8 million metric tons of plastic were produced with a monetary value of $712 billion. This economic valuation, as many such valuations do, completely ignores the fact that plastic pollution presents a real and present danger to human, animal, and plant life, both on land and sea, across all continents. It is going to be a threat, actually. Plastic is going to be a threat to both human beings and animals on land and sea, across all continents. So it fails to take into account the fact that more than 90% of the plastic we produce is not recycled, ending up in waste dumps and eventually making its way to the soil, rivers, and oceans, and now even the clouds and in fresh rain water. So we thought until now that rainwater is fresh and it is potable. Directly you can drink rainwater, we thought, but now the discovery is that even in the fresh rainwater, there are the particles of plastic. What are you going to do? So therefore, we have destroyed the entire ecosystem. We have destroyed the land, we have destroyed the water, oceans with excessive use of plastic. And this particular statistics is absolutely stunning and unnerving. 90% of the plastic that we produce is not decomposed. It is not decomposable. Therefore, it is going to live for eternity, for thousands and thousands of years. The plastic that we produce today is going to survive for thousands of years. And what are we going to do about it as far as the future of our children and grandchildren and future generations are concerned? So small wonder that many microplastics have been termed by many global environmental scientists and policymakers as an existential challenge to humanity. These microplastics have become the existential challenge to humanity alongside other prominent planetary crises such as climate change and biodiversity collapse. Country representatives met in Busan for a fifth round of negotiations of the Intergovernmental Negotiations Committee, hoping to hammer out the fine details of an agreement to limit global productions of plastic. This time they met, they wanted to come out with some solutions, but what is the end result? The discussions ended and the talks concluded without any real progress, agreeing only to meet again on negotiations next year. So it is back to square one. They met with a lot of fanfare. Ultimately, on the last day, they said, we cannot solve the problem urgently. Therefore, we are going to meet again next year. This is the fate of the, the climate change, the problems, the processes, the plans, projects that we adopt to combat microplastics and things like that. This is only one example. There are various other examples which are going to threaten human health. And unless all of us determined to put our heads together at our individual level, at the family level, at the society level, at the state level and national level, and so on and so on, we have to plan very meticulously and we have to determine to combat this menace called climate change in our own small, humble ways in order to ensure overall health of the planet. So with this, I am going to stop. We have 15 minutes for question and answer. Kindly participate in this. It need not be questions, could be observations, could be inputs from your side, could be feedback, etc. So at the end of 2 talks, I look forward to some questions and observations on your part. I'll be terribly disappointed if you don't participate, because always I have been benefited by your inputs. At the end of my talk, the question and answer sessions have always benefited me. Believe me, I'm not telling you a lie. You are going to enlighten me on various aspects which we have discussed this afternoon. Whether it is environment, or whether it is integrity, whether it is morality, is it practicable? How are you going to achieve integrity and morality when the entire society is marauded by violations of every kind? For instance, how to safeguard individual ethics and morality and integrity when we are engulfed by the violation, the egregious violation of all these factors. These are some of the questions we have